So the first lady's box is filled with people. Some you've heard of, some you haven't. The Laken Riley's family, the family of the gentleman killed in Pennsylvania when Donald Trump attempted assassination on his life. Other people connected to the crimes of illegal immigrants, people connected to trans teens, trans athletes in women's sports, all of these themes, law enforcement, all of these themes represented in the First Lady's box. And I will start out the conversation about tonight by saying what I believe is the greatest single misunderstanding Democrats have about Donald Trump, which is he talks largely about policies that are popular, not just popular with the extreme MAGA base, but every person in the First Lady's box today is related to an issue that is not popular in Chevy Chase. It's not popular amongst the Democratic caucus in the House or the Senate. It's not popular in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But you know what? It probably is popular in Madison, Wisconsin, and parts of Berkeley. So, Sean,
Or
tell
the
us
south
about
side of Boston.
yeah, exactly. Tell us about tonight's event. What you see as the president's strategy, and then we'll talk about the Democrats' strategy.
Yeah, so there's the I don't even want to characterize it, but I mean the guest that you mentioned who will illuminate some policy or issue, right? So he's also got a guy named Mark and Malphine Fogel from Butler, Pennsylvania, who's was held hostage by the Russian government. So he's got, I mean, those are all, and I say this with a head cold, but they're like the props. They illuminate the policy that he wants to talk to. Everybody gets up and claps. It draws distinctions. But my expectation is you're going to find the first. It's like tonight's going to be like the Joe Rogan Experience joint address. I think for the first 40 minutes, he's going to go through a recitation of the last 42 days and what they've done to fulfill the president's campaign promises, to close the border, to address fentanyl, to bring American investment home. And I know we didn't talk about it, but yesterday's investment of another $100 billion on top of the Sony investment. I mean, the Apple investment, on the Masasan investment. I mean, we're talking billions and hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in the United States. I think the president's going to point that out, what he's doing to bring jobs and manufacturing and investment back to America. He's going to talk about addressing all of the things that he has done to fulfill his campaign promises, and then obviously hit on these social, cultural aspects as well. And then I think he's going to get into a lot of aspirational stuff. And that's everything from like going to space to cancer and other things. But he will talk about where he sees America and this idea of renewing the American dream.
Dan.
Yeah, I agree with Sean. It's promises made, promises kept. He's going to talk about, all the changes that he's implemented here. I'll be curious how much attention is put on Doge, or whether it's just kind of part of that promises made, promises kept, because it's been dominating the headlines a lot recently. But I would imagine they want to try to broaden this out to, other stuff that they've accomplished. We talked about it yesterday, how much focus is on the economy, which is a little bit of a growing Achilles heel. Again, it's only 6 weeks in, but people's patience, is also thin. And then I think, for the Democratic Party, and I don't know, Mark, if you want to go there or you want to just stay. Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest challenge, and I wrote about this yesterday afternoon, is on a lot of these issues, as you say, Mark, they are 80-20, 70-30 issues. Like, just take Trump out of it. If you put in a vacuum, should we seal the border and stop the flow across of illegal immigrants? It is an 80-20. I think the problem for the Democrats is they don't see a lot of this as problems.
Right.
So they say, with Doge, well, sure, there's some bad spending, but they don't really believe it. Like, at its core, what they're upset about is the status quo is changing. And that's a problem, because if they, try to have props and they interrupt and they have, people who are fired by the federal government, I think what it's going to tell voters is we just want the status quo, when overwhelmingly voters say we want the status, we want change, we want these problems, they are problems, and we want them solved.
Dan, I'm glad you brought up the props thing, because obviously that was, there was a lot of discussion in the morning reads about this. what they may do. It's funny, one of them was bring eggs, and I'm like, okay, so let's just be clear. You guys haven't said a word on inflation or in egg prices that's caused by the bird flu for 4 years, and suddenly now you want to bring eggs and cartons of eggs to a State of the Union 40 days into a new administration. It's just really rich that suddenly inflation is a big deal for Democrats, which it's what the president ran on. I think he's tackling it, and that's part of what causes inflation is government spending. So if you're reducing government spending, you are by default actually addressing inflation. But I think that it's rich for a bunch of Democrats to sit around now and talk about the effect of inflation who've sat silent. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And so if you're going to talk about it, you have to be able to say, as I said, for the last 3 years, inflation is this, and this is the policies. But you can't just wake up one day, come to Jesus because inflation's a big deal now that the parties have switched after you sat silent for 3 years.
One thing
a lot of them didn't. I mean, a lot of members of Congress did say. Joe Biden, as we said, was fairly silent about it. But look, Sean, the flip side to that is Republicans bragged that they could deal with it quickly. I mean,
I'm not saying that you can't. Look, it's politics,
and they haven't. And when stuff like natural disasters and other things fed inflation under Biden, there was no sympathy about, this is not something Joe Biden, like, part of that was to get out of COVID, right?
I think you'll see some of the policies known, like on energy and on tariffs, even though most economists disagree with them. I think you'll see a section tonight saying, here's what I'm doing to bring down prices.